But every time I get right here, my throat starts getting rough and scratchy. Yeah, behind me here. Maybe it's the way the fans blow the air right in this one spot. I don't know. Yeah. Well, we're about going to be finished with Ezekiel today. It's like Jeremiah and Ezekiel are long books. There's some other prophets coming up that are called the minor prophets because they're shorter. Yeah, they Hosea, Joel, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum. That's how I have to say it, so I don't forget where I'm at. I thought it was interesting. The Dr. MacArthur, when in writing, he said, in the law of Moses, God established that sin in one generation would produce consequences in subsequent generations. And we see that all the way through Exodus, that the sins of the father will be visited on the son. And if you guys don't straighten up, then your children are going to be punished. Right. Yeah. Right. And we had a really, really bad reaction. And repenting sometimes is hard to do. I thought it's interesting that the Israelites are no different than we are today. These, they were the existing Israelites, they were using this principle to absolve themselves of blame for their current situation. They blamed their captivity that was a result of the sin of the previous generation. There's nothing they could have done about it. I like it. Yeah. That's not true. That's what like I say, it's always nice to have somebody to blame. When you do something wrong or whatever, it's always nice if they come up with someone who you can blame. It's my brother's fault. I have two young boys that live at my house, and it's never their fault. Yeah, I know people like that. Yeah, it happens every once in a while. And the thing is, when we get to be adults, it's the same thing, except we've learned how to cover it or refine it so that it doesn't just jump out there in front of people. We act the same way. But these Israelites, they had rebelled against God and gone to idolatry to the point that some of them were sacrificing their children to Molech. And so they were just as responsible as the others were. Yeah, we talk about God. Israel.
People can lose their concern, and God can say, well, I don't remember any of that you did. I see what you're doing now.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
I read
some
something.
people believe once saved, always saved, but I don't know.
Yeah, well,
That and kind of wonder.
well, the difference is that he was talking about the people of Israel, not the children of salvation. So I read something this week. It said, Satan calls you by your sin and forgets your name. God remembers your name and forgets your sin. I thought, now that's really, I don't remember, I should have written down who said it, but that's really good. When Satan tempts us and draws us away, he doesn't call us by first name. He said, oh, you know that sin, you like that, you need to come over here, I got more of it over here. But God looks at us and he remembers our name and forgets our sin. God made some promises to Israel, and it seems at this juncture in their history that he made a mistake or he didn't keep his word. But all those promises he made to Israel, they all had a little caveat that said, now, this is going to happen that way if you obey. And if you don't, I'm not going to forget you, but it's not going to be quite as nice as it could have been. Yeah. And so, the king of Israel, of Judah, Zedekiah, he thought all this confusion going on with the north, I'm going to go ahead and start my own rebellion down here, and they won't even know about me. But they did know about him, and so his rebellion failed, and the result in Nebuchadnezzar said, okay, if you're going to be that way, I'm just going to come take you back to Babylon. Babylon was really a nice place to be, unless you were an Israelite supposed to be in Israel. And when we get to Daniel, we find that Daniel was one of those in captivity that God used and God led. And, I was thinking, if it wasn't for Israel disobeying and being taken captive, look at how many things we wouldn't have had or learned, or the blessings that God, that he put in the scriptures for us. When we disobey and God punishes us, instead of looking at the punishment, like we would say, why did God do that? Even though it was our fault. We need to kind of just step back and say, okay, not why is this happening to me, but what is God trying to teach me? It's really easy to say when things don't go our way or things go wrong, why is God doing that? Well, maybe what is God trying to teach me? It's a better way to look at it. It doesn't really change the situation, but it changes us. And that's what God's after in the first place. He wants to change us. Whether, you can be involved in an organization that one time was really godly and spiritual and God grew, and then all of a sudden it seems now it's nothing. God's trying to change those people so that they'll walk with him, be what they should be. Not so much looking to punish people. Ezekiel goes on, chapters 25 to 32, and talks about what God's going to do to these other countries around Israel. And when we get to the end, and we get to the Revelation, we find that all those countries that think they're so good, God's going to take care of it and punish them in the end too. It's the end of one God dealing with human beings in one sense. It's the beginning of God dealing with us in another sense.
Everybody thinks the Revelation is the end.
No, I remember sitting in a Sunday school class, the teacher said, what does the word revelation mean? I said, the end. Well, that's not true. It means it's a revelation. It's a revealing of things. And so, but Ezekiel said God's going to Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, Tyre, Sidon, and Egypt. And it's interesting, some of those cities still exist today. Tyre and Sidon, it talks about Lebanon, talks about Syria, Egypt, and yeah, and you know,
Talks about it in 3 different ways. One is a tree falling in Lebanon, and one is a big fish put up on the ground.
yeah,
You must not like them very
no, I mean, you think they kept Israel captive for over 400 years, but Egypt is not, it doesn't carry with it the same threat that it did years ago. Do you remember in 1973? All of us old enough to remember that. When Egypt was going to destroy Israel, and 10 days later, the desert was filled with their downed airplanes and their tanks and their equipment and stuff, and they didn't destroy Israel. And they have been, in one sense, God has dealt with them in a way that even to this day they exist, but they're not quite as powerful as they were once in one time. And so these kingdoms that God was going to deal with in Ezekiel, some of them were supposed to be taken care of way long time ago when they entered the land.
well. When they came in, they just took care of people in the countries that he told them to take care of. A lot of their problems later on we got,
Yes, it's
and he was with them.
yeah.
They got to a point, you know, I'm comfortable. Just quit.
Yeah, well, when they came into Canaan land, it's sort of like, I guess you could describe it as a difference between a man looking for something and a woman looking for something. Men, we seem to look like this, you know, it's a tunnel vision. Well, it's not there. And then, you know, your wife comes in and, oh, here it is right over here. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I've experienced it more than once. One guy, Nate Bargatze, the comedian, said, we left something in the car, and so I went out and looked. He said, I turned the whole truck of my truck upside down. I looked under everything, couldn't find it. So I came and told my wife it's not there. She went out, and he said in 20 seconds she was back with it in her hand. I don't know if I've ever been quite that bad, but it's like men don't look for things very well. And that's what the children of Israel, when they came in, they looked at Jericho, then they looked at Ai, and then once they conquered those, it's kind of like, well, we're kind of set. We got it made now. All this, and if they had gone ahead and done what God told them to do, they'd have been a lot better off right away and later on. But God does deal with these men, and I think one thing we can learn from this is that God doesn't forget. And sometimes God's people are put in situations where they have to suffer something that was not their fault, and people hold it against them, and it wasn't their fault, and God remembers that. He does not forget what the one did to some of his children. He remembers it. And the thing is, it's different times in the Old Testament, we read the statement that, and God remembered what he told Moses. And so he was not going to destroy all the people. The journeys in the wilderness are some of my favorite things. You remember Korah, he was there. He was going to take a bunch of people. We're going back to Egypt. Moses, you can't do this. We're going back to Egypt. And started spreading discord. And so Moses said, well, everybody, all of you that agree with Korah, go stand over there with him. And so they did, and about 10,000 people, God said, okay, and opened the earth, and they just all fell in, and it closed again. God has ways to deal. He didn't usually deal with stuff like that today, except sometimes you wonder, when we had all those horrible fires in California, and you looked at those neighborhoods that every house was burnt down. That's awful. And could God have stopped that? He could have. But he didn't, because sometimes there are things that if you put this in motion, it's going to happen. May have been somebody was careless or whatever, and once it starts burning, you find that it's really difficult to stop it. And God deals with us in ways that we don't understand. He keeps us from things. He blesses us with things. He watches over us with things we don't even understand. Ezekiel 24, Son of man, write down the name of the day, this very day. The king of Babylon started his siege against Jerusalem this very day. And God had told Ezekiel that the city of Jerusalem was under siege. Normally it would not have reached its captivity, but because of their sin, God said, if you continue to do this after I've warned you and bless you, he said, you're not going to end up in a good place. And they didn't. Yes.
There's another thing in 24. Ezekiel's wife died.
Yep.
He says, they will see that, you will understand that, and they will understand your wife died and you're doing this. They're going to mourn over their city, same as you mourn over your wife.
And they did. They went to captivity, and when they got there, it was nice as Babylon and Syria. There were beautiful cities and places. It wasn't home. And then Daniel came back, and the others, they came back, and they built the wall, and they built the city, and then they built the temple again. And what did the old people say? It ain't nothing like the one we had before. And the one that they had before, there wasn't a building like that ever in history that was like that. I mean, everything was covered with gold. And the new temple that they built, it was nice and it was big and it functioned just as it should have, but it wasn't what they had before. Right.
The other one had, you got to remember, that was saved right before and lots of money spent on that.
Yeah, and Solomon used all those contacts around that part of the world to get the cedars of Lebanon.
His dad saved stuff too. His dad, if you read the Bible, his dad was already saving the stuff for that temple.
David's greatest desire was to build a temple.
Yes, so he provided a lot of stuff for them.
And God finally said, just stop, you're not going to do that. You've got other things I want to use you for, but you're not going to build a temple because you've been known as a man of war. And your son will be known as a man of peace. He's going to build the temple. And so David, at that point, kind of, okay, Lord, that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be. And he stopped doing with that, making plans of for him to do it. He had already accumulated some of these things. And so sometimes we have something in mind that we're absolutely sure this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is the direction. I'm sure this is what God wants me to do, and so I'm going to keep going that direction. And sometimes God says, go ahead here, gives it a little push. But sometimes he said, no, that's not where I want you to be at all. It's not bad. That's just not where I want you to be. I had some friends in college who they came to Bible college prepared to go to the mission field. And that was their desire. And they did all kinds of short-term mission trips, and then they practiced that. And they started church in the city just so they could know how to do that. And then they were planning to go to the mission field, and the field they were going to, it closed. You couldn't go there anymore. And so they began to look at another one. And all the way along, it seemed like every time they got, it was just like there was a wall. And when that happens, we have a choice to make. We can get mad and pout. Or we can say, okay, Lord, what are you trying to teach me? And that's what they did eventually. They gave up their dream of going to the mission field and realized that this is a mission field. I've done a couple. Yeah, I've been to a couple of different churches. Yes. a couple of churches that they have a sign over their exit doors that says you are entering the mission field. And that's true. We are. There's a song we used to sing with the kids. I can be a little missionary. I can't talk. Uh,
33, he renewed Ezekiel's call to be a watchman.
yes. And God does that sometimes, but we need to remember that God is dealing with us as individuals.
Then he renewed in that same chapter the business of the father can be great, the son can be terrible, the father can be great. It doesn't come back on the other generation. If your father and grandfather were terrible and you follow God, you are going to hell.
You can break this,
Curse won't break
break the cycle.
on you. God doesn't trigger that. If you were a terrible person early in your life, now is what you look at. Through your heart, the heart you have at the moment.
Yeah, God is not like doesn't deal with people like we do.
I wish I could do like God.
Yeah,
I wish I could forget things and not remember them.
yeah. I wouldn't.
People that have
I wouldn't mind.
wronged me in the past, yes, I forgive them. But I forgive them every time I think of those.
That's right. I
I wish I could just say, oh, I don't remember that.
I don't
Nice person. I just go on.
I don't remember.
Yeah, but he also says in the Bible that you're not supposed to let somebody come back and do bad things to you. You should remember how they act and you should watch over them.
Yeah, it's
Still got to forgive them, but you should watch over them.
my problem with remembering things is I wish it would come to mind before I go to bed. Let me remember it in the middle of the afternoon or something. But you lay down and ding, and sometimes it makes it difficult. Well, I'm not going to think about that now, but we sometimes do, even good or bad. God in Ezekiel 33 and a little bit far on beyond, he offers hope to the people rather than judgment. As bad as the prophecies that Ezekiel has been doing, God comes now to offers grace and mercy and a point toward the future of the regathering of God's children into the promised land. Someone, a historian, has said that we fought World War I to prepare Israel for these people to come back, to prepare the land. And World War II was fought to prepare the people. And if you remember, after the World War II, the great influx of people back into Israel. And it became, since then, what it is today as a power and all those things. I don't know whether that's true or not. But after World War II, the people started pouring into Israel. And it's even today, their population is growing by people who are of Israeli heritage coming back.
I watched a show about that coming back. Oh, it was interesting. They hadn't found Levitical tribe, godly tribe, priestly tribe. They hadn't found it, and they did find, I forget what country they found them in, but they found Levitical tribe. And they've now moved the Levitical tribe back. So now all 12 tribes are back. Well, technically 13 tribes, 12 tribes, and then there's the Levitical tribe, the tribe God has his own. So all 13 tribes are back there.
And it's interesting to me,
So that was one of their things about rebuilding the temple. They couldn't find the Levitical tribe to have priests.
how that to the minute detail God deals with those people, like he said he was going to thousands of years ago. And he's doing, even today, things that he said he would do. And he also said, if you don't follow me in the right direction, then I'm going to punish you. And has there been any nation or nationality that's received more punishment than Israel has. It seems that I love to look at the map, and there's this little dinky piece of real estate along the Mediterranean Sea that everybody seems to be so interested in. And it's every time there's been a major war back in history, they all came down through Jerusalem this way. Then when they went home, they went through that way and destroyed it or did something. And Hitler tried to extinguish the Jews. And he pretty much managed to do that in Poland. How many millions of people from Poland were killed, and others. And God allowed him to go so far, and they said, okay, that's enough. And he turned it off. And Hitler was killed or killed himself or whatever. But God has promised, I always have a remnant that I'm going to bring back. Even today. Yeah.
In the country, they've already built all the utensils and all the stuff to be in the temple. They've got a lot of stuff already put together. They're ready to build.
Yeah.
That mosque to be gone.
The Wailing Wall is the foundation of the old temple. The Jews go there every day.
The Romans couldn't destroy that foundation. They couldn't move it. So they had to leave it. They would have destroyed it.
They would have been destroyed if they could have. I wonder why they couldn't.
Well, some way they knew how to move them blocks.
Yeah, God said, no, God said, you've done enough. And that's enough. We're going to leave this part. And but God is still working. All of the anti-Semitism that's going on in America now in some of the universities, and we saw those, and it's like, it's not new. It just, they had a platform and they came out from hiding. Marilee's dad, not her mother, but her dad, his parents and the three aunties, and his parents came from Alsace-Lorraine. They were Jewish before the war, and they came to America. And Marilee's dad always, he served on the board of 2 mission to the Jew, different ones. He always spoke every summer at the end of August at a big conference they had in Chicago. And it's like, why so much interest in the Jewish? Well, when he died, we found out why, because they were Jewish. And so I said, okay, told my children, you're half Jewish now. So
I don't think it worked.
no, but it is. I mean, but they. So when God said, I'm going to make your people as the sand of the sea. Now that's more than 6 million, and the stars of the sky. God, there are people that are descendants of Abraham, as we would call the Hebrews or the Israel. They're everywhere. Some of them, as Marilee's brothers and sisters, didn't even know. But God's going to bring back a remnant, and the same thing with Christians today. There may be some, even in our lifetime, where we live, persecution and tribulation like there is in other places in the world. South Sudan, Nigeria, and there are other places that they are killing people simply because they claim to be a Christian. And we think that's horribly awful. And that can never happen here. Well, considering what's been happening in the last 2 or 3 years, I'm not sure that it can't happen here. Maybe not that extent, but the persecution is there. Satan doesn't like God's people or the church. And Sometimes it seems as if he stepped back and he just let us do what we want to do. But Paul said, beware when all people speak well of you. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be obnoxious so people won't speak well of us. But it's kind of like when you go along and everything's working fine, everything just falling into place like it's supposed to. Sometimes maybe we got to slow down and look around and see out why. Because Satan sometimes allows those things. And we need to be aware of the fact that just with Adam and Eve, he said, oh, you're not going to die. There's different words for die. And the one he said, you're not going to die immediately. And God said, in eating this, dying, thou shalt die. Now, you will begin to die, and eventually you will die. Adam and Eve didn't understand that. No one had ever died. I'm not sure they were aware of that, but Satan, said, it'll be okay, just go ahead and eat this. When you eat this tree, the knowledge of good and evil, you're going to be just like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. And we do. The problem is we always choose to do that which is wrong. In his reflections, he said, do not trust in worldly might. And he used the staff of reed to the house of Israel. In other words, all these other nations around that were helping Israel, he said, just like lean on the staff of a reed. And what happens when you lean on the staff of a reed? Doesn't last very long, does it? And so that's what happened. Don't trust in worldly might, because God can break that down as quick as he wants to. Then he said God is the leader of his people. Ezekiel pointed out in chapter 34 that in the future moment, when he would be the shepherd of his people, he said, I myself will search for my sheep. And he did. But not all of them. Some of them had intermarried and stayed where they were. But there was a remnant that he brought back. And have you ever watched Schindler's List? It's worth the watch. Have your Kleenexes next to you. Schindler was, how many of the Jews he saved from being killed, and the children. And he wasn't ever really recognized. But the movie ends with where his grave is. It's not just, it's a nice sepulcher that's built up. And descendants of the people that he saved all started coming up from Poland and putting a rock on it. See how many descendants there still were. It's a good movie for watching to see what happened in World War II that we didn't see. And when I watched this, I see God was always working. He had somebody that would take it, doing this and that. Yeah, it was. And there's another movie that you don't want to watch without a big head. It's called The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Sounds like a really neat movie, doesn't it?
He points to Jesus and to do things all the way through this. But when you get towards the end, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Jesus said, my sheep, I'll feed them. And I'll take care of them. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, David said, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. My rod and thy staff, they may comfort me a little bit, but they're not going to protect me.
Which one is this? Is the valley of the bones, where he has him put prophesies to these bones that they come back to life, and now all start coming back to life.
Now that would be scary.
I got to read that.
Jesus said in John 10, it's the whole chapter of John 10 is good, but he says that I am the good shepherd. I lay me down my life for the sheep. And all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, and then in Isaiah chapter 7, and Isaiah chapter 55, and other places in the Old Testament, we see this truth presented that God himself was going to somehow come down and redeem his children. Those people are writing about that. Did Isaiah really understand that when, behold, a virgin shall conceive and be with a child? Could he comprehend that? No, I don't comprehend it, even though I know it happened. Right. And it comes, but all of it points to the fact that Jesus was going to go to the cross. That song with that Gaithers, I've used it many times. There's a line that's drawn through the ages. On that line stands an old rugged cross.
We wonder why they couldn't have seen some of that, but think about it. What do we have in front of us? A book. And it tells everything. It tells the beginning, it tells the end of Jesus' life. And we get to see all that unfringed. We understand that. Did they understand that? They didn't have the New Testament. They barely had the Old Testament. It wasn't like they could pick it up and read it.
That's right. There were scrolls, and they were kept in the temple. You didn't get to take it home. They did a thing, I don't know, an 8-part series called David, about David being the shepherd, ended up killing Goliath and being anointed to be king. And in it they show that at the temple where they had all these scrolls in these little cubby holes. And if you wanted to find something, you had to go to the right cubby hole, pull out the right scroll, and then unroll it until you find the right place. And then you put it back. And we have so much more, because see, most of us have at least one of these. At home or sometimes in our car or whatever. We have the truth, and we can take it with us. So we should be better than they are. Sometimes we're not necessarily better, but we should be. We have the opportunity.
As we get towards the end of this, he talks about Gog, G-O-G.
Gog and Magog.
I watched a run on this from the Christian college in Missouri, and the guy put a video on, and he talks about Gog. And he says, "You don't believe how many people have tried to figure out who Gog is. Nobody knows who Gog is, and they blame it on this guy, blame it on that guy. That's when we don't know. Is that in the future? It sounds like the big war in Revelation is what it sounds like looking at it and whatnot he's talking about.
Yep.
That could be a future thing.
It is.
Some of these chapters will tell you where they are, when they are, but some of the chapters don't tell you where they are or when they are.
Like I said before, and this is the truth about prophecy in the futures. Standing on this mountain, looking at that mountain over there. But the valley in the middle, we don't. Those prophets didn't have access to that. Well, sometimes we're in the middle, and all that God said, all that end time stuff is going to happen. But they saw it. I don't think they understood it, but this is what God showed me, and so that's the way that it is. If you've ever driven in the mountains, you know that it's always farther than it looks. I was watching something the other day. They talked about going to explore the Rocky Mountains, and they were driving, and when you're probably about 1,000 miles away, it seems like, you see there they are. Yeah, but they're not right there. They're a ways down the road. And
Like we went out to Colorado, trucking across, you see them mountains off over here, but you knew they were a lot of hours away.
yeah, and so these prophets, they told the truth, but they were standing here looking at that. They didn't prophesy too much about a lot of things in the middle.
Well, they didn't always understand what they see.
Oh.
Because he showed them some things, like the cherubim and whatnot.
It did.
Interesting, at one point in time, he talks about the Pharaoh, and he talks about him being a cherub.
there are things that,
That's kind of, whoa, so he was something before he sent him to the earth to be Pharaoh.
I've always said that,
Because I think that's why he wrote 3 chapters about him.
yeah,
He wasn't very happy with it.
everything that God knows about everything that's going on is not in the Bible. Everything he wants us to know is in the Bible. Everything that I need to know is here. And so there may be other things that are not in here that maybe God said, well, you know, that's not really that important. You don't need to know that. Those are things that we want to know. Yeah. So, I know that.
One book to give you an example, you know the man of many colors, Joseph? He went to Egypt, he married one of Pharaoh's
Daughters or
daughters.
something.
And there's a book about why he could marry her. And how God cleansed her and made her his wife.
Yeah, you know, and
But that's not in this book.
when, yeah,
Well, I know. Well, yeah. But what I mean is somebody wrote that book at the same time a lot of these other books were written about that. Well,
the thing is,
this is God breathed book.
these are 66 books that God breathed. This is what he wants us to know. There's a book like Josephus, Josephus, the historian that wrote about the Jews and Jesus and what happened. And he wrote it not as inspired, but as being there and seeing what's going on. And if you study, right, he wrote what he saw. And he maybe didn't understand it, but I want you guys to know this is what happened. And a lot of things that he tells us about that happened was going on are things that we'd like to know, but they're not inspired.
Yes, that may be the reason that book didn't
Right.
make canon for this.
Have there, you know,
We don't understand how that canon came about, but this is inspired text.
sometimes your children ask you questions. And it's like, you don't need to know that now. You know, or I'm not going to tell you that now. I'm not going to answer that. When you get older or another time, maybe I will, but right now that's something you don't need to know. And they don't like that answer very well. But that's sort of the way it is. And sometimes I think God says, you know,
What do y'all think of the measuring of the temple?
yeah.
That measuring of the temple walls, measuring of the rooms, measuring of, you know, just measuring of all the rooms and everything. Wasn't that quite the thing?
Yeah, and they have all that down in Israel.
But was that temple that they were going, that he measures, is that the temple they built after they came back?
I think so, or they tried to. Or is that the one that they're going to?
Some people think it's the temple, okay, I'm just bringing it out here, some people believe that is the measurements of the next temple to be built.
And it might
And
be.
it may be, they may have used those measurements to build that temple, but it wasn't quite as up to par as built on.
And it'll never be like Solomon's temple.
They're going to build one again when we have measurements.
Yeah.
But is it going to have the river flowing from it? That's the problem.
They measured with cubits. I don't know what a cubit is. About 18 inches or something, what somebody said, but
There's a long and short.
yeah. 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 Well, that's why, you know, we have 12 inches is a foot. When they first started measuring by feet, the story's told, and I'm not sure that it's completely true, but the king asked one of his builders to build him a bed. And so the builder had the king lay down, and he put toe to heel to toe, and he measured how many feet he was. And they built the bed, and it was too short. And the king was very unhappy. But the difference was that the builder had small feet, and the king had bigger feet. So they came down, and the king went heel to toe, and made it that way. So that's one way that a foot became standard to be 12 inches. And all this stuff that goes on, I think I watch the news and I listen to the stuff going on. I don't watch nearly as much news as I used to. It's sometimes easy for to say, okay, God, are you really in control of all this mess that's going on? This thing with Savannah Guthrie's mother, this reporter. I look at it and it's really sad, but to me it's kind of like, see, nobody, no matter how much money you have, is really safe if someone really wants to do something, they can do it. No matter how many cameras or alarms or whatever you have, if somebody wants something, they're going to come take it. But God is in control. He has a plan, and he's fitting the pieces together. Those 1,000-piece puzzles, every piece looks exactly the same shape.
Our genes, everything
Yeah.
that's in us, I'm sure he can handle anything he wants to handle.
Yeah,
It's complicated.
when God made Adam and Eve, have you ever looked at your ear, how that works? There's this cochlea and a little hammer thing in there, that little hairs. And the little hairs kind of help you hear, and if you hear the same tone for a number of years, that hair wears down, it's gone, then you can't hear that tone anymore. People who work on some of these, in construction of these high-rise with all the hammering and welding going on, they talk to each other because all those little hairs of that noise is worn off until they don't hear it anymore. Or your respiratory system. You think about the air comes in here and it goes down into your lungs and it circulates into the little bronchioli, and then the carbon dioxide comes along and pushes the air pushes the old carbon dioxide out, and then you breathe out and it goes out again. All that, and then don't even get me started about what the stuff that's in here. God did all that, and it's amazing, and the smarter we get, the more we see what God did.
Well, we start looking at God's stuff he built,
Yeah.
we feel dumb.
Yeah.
I don't care how smart they are with computers, I don't care how smart they are with anything, they're not even anything close.
And so I can go to sleep at night. At least I can rest assured that God's in control of what's going on. I do not have to worry about that. And it's kind of like Forrest Gump, when Captain Dan comes and tells him, we sold this and I bought stock in this Apple, and you're a wealthy man, and what does Forrest say? Well, one less thing to worry about. Yeah, it's so I can lay down at night and I may not go right to sleep, but the one thing I don't worry about is who's in control of everything. That's God. And I can rest assured of that. I read most of the,
Did you know